Imagine this for a second. A really fundamental mismatch right at the very heart of your life.
Mm.
What if the most important relationship, the one you needed for love, for safety, for everything, was being run by someone who was emotionally just years behind you?
Someone who's basically a child in an adult suit.
Exactly, but with all the power of a parent.
And that is a surprisingly common and often a profoundly painful reality. It's what the psychologist Lindsay C. Gibson really gets into in her work on emotional immaturity.
And we're not just talking about adults having a bad day here, are we?
Not at all. This isn't about moments of selfishness. It's an entire operating system, an OS built on fear, on rigidity, and just this inability to handle any kind of real emotional depth.
Right. So today we're doing a deep dive into those core concepts of emotional immaturity, or EI, based on her work. And our goal here really is not about blaming those parents. It's about clarity for you, the listener, who might have spent years just confused by these patterns.
Mm.
Recognizing these traits, it really does offer a path toward healing and, I think more importantly, towards self-knowledge.
It does. And when we talk about emotional immaturity in parenting, what we're really describing are adults who are, at their core, afraid of genuine emotion.
Afraid of it.
Yeah. They see emotional closeness, vulnerability, as a threat. And so their instinct, their gut reaction, is to pull back, to cope by, denying or distorting reality instead of facing it.
So the kid's need for connection just gets steamrolled.
Every time. The child's real emotional needs will almost always lose out to the parent's need for their own comfort, their own survival instincts, and the result is this long, long pattern of emotional neglect.
And the most devastating consequence of that, of the parent's fear pushing the kid away, is this concept the source keeps coming back to, emotional loneliness.
Yes.
I really want to land on this for a minute because it's the core wound, isn't it? It's this painful sense of isolation that exists even when all your physical needs are met.
Meticulously met sometimes.
Right. You have the best school, there's food on the table, a nice house, but inside you just feel completely and utterly unseen.
It creates this core emptiness that is so confusing. Because you look around and think, I have no reason to feel this way.
You feel guilty for
You
it.
feel so guilty. Society tells you, you had a good childhood. But emotional loneliness isn't about someone not being there physically. It's the absence of being seen, of being recognized.
Let's ground this in a couple of the stories from the material because they're so powerful. I'm thinking of David. He said his family lived parallel lives with no points of contact. And when he tried to explain that feeling, he used this image. He said, it was incredibly lonely. I used to get this image of floating in the ocean with no one around me. That's how it felt at home.
Wow. Floating in the ocean, inside your own house.
Exactly. That disconnect is just, it says everything.
That image is so profound because it's about being adrift, being unmoored, in the one place you're supposed to feel safest. The emotional world is just empty space, uninhabitable.
And then there's Rhonda's story.
Yeah.
She was only 7 years old. And she's standing by the moving truck with her whole family, parents, 3 older siblings. Everyone is there. And yet she felt totally alone. She said she knew even then that it was on her to cope with all the stress of the move by herself.
It's 7. And that's the tragic lesson, isn't it? That premature self-reliance. The physical bodies are all there, but the emotional system is just offline. It forces that little kid to take on this huge adult task of self-regulation.
A task she's way too young for.
Way too young. And to really get why that parental failure is so deep, we have to define what they were withholding. We need to be clear about what emotional intimacy actually is.
Okay.
It's that profound feeling of safety. The safety to open up completely, to be seen for who you really are, flaws and all, and knowing that the other person is trying to know you, not to judge you or fix you.
Emotionally mature parents can do that. They're attuned, they're dependable.
They welcome their kids' feelings with curiosity. But the EI parent does the exact opposite. They're self-preoccupied. So if a child gets upset, they don't offer comfort. They might get anxious themselves, or nervous, or even angry.
Angry that the child is upset.
Yes. They might even punish the child for having feelings. And that reaction just instantly shuts down that kid's natural, healthy urge to reach out. And that right there, that's the mechanism. That's the why behind all that loneliness and frustration you might have felt for years.
Okay, so before we start listing out the specific traits of immaturity, let's set the benchmark. What does emotional maturity actually look like?
Right. What's the goal we're aiming for?
Exactly. It sounds like it has to be a state of pretty high integration.
It is. And the good news for you, the listener, is that it's way more measurable than just some, murky matter of opinion. The sources here are rooted in some serious psychological theory,
Okay.
and they define emotional maturity as the capacity to think objectively and conceptually, while at the same time sustaining deep, flexible emotional connections to others,
So it's using both parts of the brain at once, the rational part and the feeling part.
without one constantly hijacking the other. That integration is everything. If you're only objective, you're cold. If you're only emotional, you're chaotic. Maturity is the fusion of the two.
So what are the key characteristics of that mature person?
Well, if we pull from foundational thinkers, people like Murray Bowen or Heinz Kohut, a few clear pillars emerge. First, the mature person can function independently. They can handle life.
Mm-hmm.
But they also maintain deep emotional attachments. They blend autonomy and connection. They don't have to sacrifice one for the other.
So they're not constantly giving up who they are to please other people,
Right.
but they're also not shutting people out just to protect their own individuality.
Exactly. Second, they're direct. They can pursue what they want without using manipulation or exploiting people. They have what you could call emotional honesty.
Okay, can we unpack that for a second? Emotional honesty, I think a lot of people confuse that with just like blurting out whatever you feel.
That's a really important distinction. Emotional honesty isn't just radical, brutal transparency. It means you can say, hey, I need this, or I'm disappointed, without making the other person feel guilty or worthless if they can't give it to you.
Ah, okay.
They can respect a boundary. They can hear no without having a meltdown. The EI person, on the other hand, they can't do that. They use guilt or, as we'll see, emotional contagion to sort of force other people to meet their needs.
That makes so much sense. Okay.
And third, this is a huge one from Bowen's work on family systems. The mature person has successfully achieved differentiation of self from their family of origin.
Differentiation, what does that mean in practice?
It means they've built their own life, their own identity, separate enough from their family's anxieties and pressures and roles that they're genuinely free to be themselves.
This is so critical for anyone listening who feels like they're still tangled up in their parents' expectations.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Because if you haven't differentiated, your emotional life is still being dictated by the anxieties of that original family system. You're still reacting. Bowen called it an undifferentiated ego mass.
Oof.
And EI parents, they often unconsciously fear their child differentiating because that child's autonomy feels like a direct threat to their own shaky identity.
And last pillar.
The last pillar, pulling from Kohut and Erickson, is that the mature person just has a well-developed, a cohesive, and resilient sense of self. They know who they are, they know what they value, and they have the internal tools to soothe themselves and navigate stress without just blaming everyone else.
So this definition, it gives us a really concrete blueprint. Maturity isn't subjective.
Not at all. It's an objective state of integration. And it's the benchmark that the EI parent just fundamentally fails to achieve.
Okay, so now let's flip the lens. Let's get into the specifics. The interconnected traits that really define this emotionally immature personality pattern.
Right, the stuff you'll actually recognize from your own life.
Exactly. And it's so important to say again, this isn't just about someone having a bad day. This is an automatic, unconscious operating system.
And because they're interconnected, if you see one, the others are almost certainly there too. It's a self-reinforcing cycle.
Yeah.
We can start with rigidity and single-mindedness.
Okay.
This is that defensive narrowing of reality we talked about. And the sources confirm that EI people can often be very successful, highly successful even.
That's the paradox, isn't it? How can someone be so successful and so rigid?
They're high-functioning, but only in controlled, structured environments. A career with a clear path, for instance. Their rigidity actually helps them focus in that kind of setting. But as soon as they encounter something that needs nuance or compromise or emotional thinking,
Like a relationship?
like a marriage or parenting a struggling child, they completely fall apart. They cannot handle ambiguity.
Yeah.
So they cope by forcing reality into a black and white manageable box.
And once their mind is made up, that's it. The door is closed. No new information gets in.
Exactly. There's only one right answer, and it's always theirs. They get incredibly defensive, humorless even, if you challenge them. There's no middle ground. It's either their rigid view or an impulsive reactive choice.
That just sounds exhausting for everyone involved.
It is, which leads right into the next trait. Low stress tolerance. They are psychologically brittle. They just do not handle stress, disappointment, or frustration well at all. Their internal world is so precarious that any little disruption can trigger a huge overreaction. Their immediate response is to just deny, distort, or replace reality. It's a very primitive defense.
So they don't assess the threat, they just react to get rid of the bad feeling.
Instantly. They can't regulate their own emotions, so they overreact. And here's the key move. Once they're upset, they don't try to calm themselves down. They immediately expect other people to soothe them by giving in and doing exactly what they want.
So if you're the child, your job becomes managing the parent's emotional stability.
Your whole life revolves around keeping their fragile internal world in balance. Which brings us to the most defining feature of all: egocentrism and self-preoccupation.
And we have to be clear, this is not the same as a child's self-centeredness.
Not at all. A child's egocentrism is innocent. It's developmental. The egocentrism of an EI adult is different. It's this constant defensive vigilance that's driven by deep anxiety and insecurity.
It sounds like they're living in a permanent state of psychological self-defense.
That is the perfect way to put it.
Yeah.
They are in perpetual fear of being exposed as inadequate or flawed or unlovable. So to prevent that from ever happening, their defenses are always up, sky high, which prevents anyone, especially their own kids, from getting close enough to see the real them.
So their whole world just revolves around managing their own anxiety.
Constantly scanning the environment. Are my needs being met? Did someone just offend me? And this self-involvement is so total that it just eclipses everyone else's feelings.
The example from the book is just chilling. The woman whose daughter is trying to share how hurt she is. And the mother's only response is, well, if I couldn't tell you, I wouldn't have anybody to talk to.
Devastating. That one sentence sums it all up. The daughter's pain is completely invisible the second the mother's need to vent appears. It's not malicious, it's just a structural failure. They literally cannot hold your emotional reality alongside their own.
And that naturally leads to them needing to be the center of attention.
It has to. If the whole family is built around managing the parent's anxiety, then the parent has to be the sun that everything orbits.
It creates this powerful gravitational pull.
It does. In any group, the most emotionally immature person will almost always dominate the time, the energy, the conversation. They get anxious when the focus shifts off of them, and once they've got it, it's incredibly hard to redirect it.
And this next trait, low empathy and emotional insensitivity, this is the one that I think is the most painful for people to recognize.
It's what makes the relationship feel so empty. Impaired empathy is absolutely central to the whole EI pattern, and it's because they are so profoundly out of touch with their own deeper feelings.
You can't feel for someone else if you can't feel for yourself.
You can't. If you've walled off your own internal world for protection, you have no way to resonate with someone else's. And this is where the concept of mentalization comes in.
Right. Can you explain that a little? What is mentalization?
It's this advanced ability to imagine that other people have their own separate, unique minds, their own thoughts, their own beliefs, their own feelings. It's a theory of mind. Good parenting is built on this. A parent mentalizes when they say, I see you're angry, and I get that it's because you feel ignored.
It makes the child feel seen as an individual.
As a separate person. The EI parent can't do this. Right. They can't step outside of themselves to hold the child's independent reality.
So they might be able to read people on a surface level.
Oh, yeah. They can be very canny, as the source puts it. They can read intentions enough to get by or even to manipulate, but they don't use it for emotional intimacy. The feeling you're left with is always, I feel sized up, I feel analyzed, but I do not feel felt for. There's just no resonant empathy. And that's why the relationship, no matter how close you are physically, always feels so shallow.
That lack of empathy, it must be why they're so bafflingly inconsistent. If you can't even connect your own feelings from one moment to the next, your behavior must be all over the place.
It creates so much instability for the child. The source material describes their personalities as weakly structured.
What does that mean, weakly structured?
Think of it like a bunch of puzzle pieces that were never pulled together, or isolated emotional clumps. They just step in and out of these contradictory emotional states, and they seem completely oblivious to the whiplash they're causing.
So they can be genuinely warm one minute, and then totally cold and hostile the next, and not even see the contradiction.
For them, the current feeling is the only reality. The memory of the previous state is just gone, overwritten, and that unpredictability forces the child to become this little emotional detective.
Always reading the room.
Constantly. Like in Elizabeth's story. She said she always had to read her mother's moods. She never knew if she was going to be welcomed or just pushed away with anger.
And that chaos is so confusing for a kid that they have to find a way to explain it.
And the simplest explanation is always, it must be me.
I must be flawed.
Exactly. The child assumes the parent's chaos is a logical reaction to something they did wrong. It's the only way to make the world feel a little bit predictable. So the child internalizes the chaos and shoulders all the blame.
That's just heartbreaking. And all that energy that should be going toward building a self gets used up creating a defensive facade just to manage the parent.
That's it. Energy is constantly being diverted away from their own natural development just to maintain this facade, suppress their own authentic feelings, to fit into the parent's very narrow, acceptable emotional range.
I think a lot of adult children hold on to this fantasy that deep down there's a real person hiding inside their parent.
Mm-hmm.
And if they just try hard enough, if they find the right key, they can unlock them.
It's such a hopeful, understandable fantasy. But the reality the sources offer is, well, it's pretty sobering. Those defenses are like psychological scar tissue. They're enduring.
They're not going away.
The energy that was poured into building them limits their emotional capacity permanently. We see this so clearly in Hannah's story. Her mother was this stern, completely unemotional woman, and when Hannah, as an adult, just asked her to share something personal,
The mother just fell apart.
burst into tears, couldn't speak. Hannah's simple attempt at emotional intimacy completely overwhelmed a lifetime of suppression. It exposed this deep well of sorrow the mother was utterly incapable of processing, let alone sharing.
The defenses were just too strong.
They were. And this rigidity often shows up in this really peculiar way. A focus on the physical over the emotional.
Right. They can be great at practical care.
They can excel at it. They'll provide great clothes, a top-notch education, a clean house. But they are totally oblivious or just deeply uncomfortable when it comes to feelings.
Which creates so much confusion because the child has all this physical evidence of love.
Overwhelming evidence, financial sacrifices, all of it. But at the same time, this profound, painful emotional lack.
So how do people talk about that confusion?
A lot of clients remembered that when they were physically sick, like with the flu, they got tons of attention, special foods, comfort,
Because physical care is safe. It's a task.
It's safe, it's tangible, it's clearly defined. Emotional attachment is messy and unpredictable, and they're terrified of it. And this contrast makes the adult child feel so guilty later on for being unhappy. How can I complain? My parents gave me everything.
They invalidate their own feelings because of the physical abundance.
Exactly. And finally, this fear of genuine emotion, it extends to other people's joy too. They become the classic killjoy.
They have to bring the mood down. High energy emotions of any kind, positive or negative, feel like a threat to their control.
Absolutely. When a kid expresses excitement or hope, the EI parent will abruptly change the subject or warn them not to get their hopes up.
But make a dismissive comment.
Right, something to just bring it down a notch and get back to that emotional flatline they're comfortable with.
Like the woman whose mom responded to her excitement about buying her first house with that just brutal line, "Yes, and then you'll find something else to go on about."
It's an automatic anxiety reaction. Genuine emotion makes them nervous.
Yeah.
They have built their whole life on keeping the emotional volume turned way down. And your excitement, just like your sadness, feels like a threat they have to neutralize immediately.
Okay, let's shift a bit and look at how this all plays out in actual conversations, in real-time interactions, especially when there's conflict. I mean, if they don't have the words for their own feelings, how do they even communicate what they need?
They don't use words. They use a much more primitive method. It's called communication by emotional contagion.
Emotional contagion.
Yeah. They don't articulate their needs. They act them out. They spread their distress, their anxiety, their anger around the room like a virus. It's what a baby does, right? A baby cries until a caregiver feels the distress and fixes the problem.
So the EI parent does the same thing. They just make everyone else miserable until someone gives them what they want.
Exactly. It's basically weaponizing their distress to force action. They upset everyone around them until the others, who are desperate for peace, will do anything to stabilize the parent's mood.
That is such a powerful concept. It's like they bring this dense, uncomfortable fog into the room and expect everyone else to fan it away for them.
That's a great way to put it. It's draining emotional labor for the child. And because the parent is just acting out the feeling, they're not trying to understand or resolve it inside themselves, so nothing ever really gets fixed.
It just creates this role reversal where the child is always responsible for managing the adult.
Always. And because of this, when a natural conflict happens in the relationship, which it always does, they are completely incapable of relationship repair.
Because repair takes maturity. You have to be able to admit you were wrong, own your part.
You need confidence to do that, and they just don't have it. They resist facing their mistakes because for them, Any small criticism instantly spirals into this huge existential fear that they are a bad person.
So, you hurt my feelings. Sounds like you were a worthless human being to them.
That's the translation in their head. So they'd rather just shut down, stonewall, deny everything than risk hearing something that threatens that incredibly fragile sense of self.
It means their idea of forgiveness is totally unrealistic.
Totally. They expect forgiveness to be like a magic eraser.
Let's just pretend it never happened.
Right. It's over. Get past your feelings. There's no processing, no rebuilding trust, no talking about how to do things differently. Your pain is just an inconvenience to them that needs to go away as quickly as possible.
Let's talk about what they demand from others. This intense pressure on the child to conform, they require demanding mirroring.
Yeah. In a healthy family, the parent mirrors the child. They show concern when the kid is sad, joy when the kid is happy. EI parents flip that completely. They expect the child to know and mirror them. Their entire self-esteem depends on things going their way and on the child complying.
So if a child shows any individuality, any sign of being a separate person, it triggers intense anxiety in the parent.
It's seen as a direct threat, a betrayal even. So they have to enforce conformity, often using shame or threats of abandonment to get the child back in line.
They need the child to be an emotional clone.
An emotional clone who validates their very limited worldview. The source gives that really powerful example of Cynthia and her volatile mother, Stella. When Cynthia decided to travel and live her own life, Stella just exploded.
Disowned her, cut off her college funds. I mean, such an extreme reaction.
It's so extreme. But it's because Stella could only feel safe if Cynthia mirrored the same kind of narrow, constrained life she herself had lived. Cynthia's freedom was a living, breathing criticism of Stella's choices, and Stella could not tolerate it. The message is just devastating. Be like me, or you are not loved.
And we see the same demand for conformity in role entitlement and coercion.
Yes. They cling to roles: parent, child, spouse. Because roles are simple. They remove the messiness and complexity of real relationships.
So role entitlement is when they act like being a parent gives them a free pass to be inconsiderate.
Exactly. Like Marty's parents. After moving nearby, they would just walk into her house unannounced. And when she politely asked them to call first, they were indignant. Their role as parents, in their minds, gave them the right to violate her privacy.
The title gives them privileges.
Unconditional privileges.
Yeah.
And role coercion is even worse. That's when they use threats or guilt to force a child into a role that's harmful to them.
Like Jillian's story. Her mother insisted she go back to her abusive husband because divorce was a sin.
The mother prioritized the rigid role of married woman over her own daughter's physical safety. Or that other anecdote about Mason's mother. When he came out as possibly gay, she said he couldn't be, because you are not a zebra.
The invalidation is just staggering. They're choosing their simple, comfortable definition of life over their child's actual, complex, sometimes painful reality.
It's the ultimate act of egocentrism. The parent's need for simplicity will always, always trump the child's need for safety and for truth.
So when you've lived for years, for decades with all of this, the demanding mirroring, the denial, the loneliness, it has to shape your adult choices in these really profound, often self-defeating ways.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
Which is why this next part about the impact on adult choices is so critical for your journey toward self-knowledge.
It creates this deep emotional insecurity and denial. People who grew up this way often, without even realizing it, just recreate that same emotional emptiness in their adult relationships.
Look at Sophie, the nurse from the source material. Her boyfriend, Jerry, prank proposes to her. He gives her a ring box with a question mark inside.
It's just such a demeaning, deflating thing to do.
It prioritizes his joke over her real, deep vulnerability. And in that moment, she's right back in that same emotional loneliness she felt as a kid. But now there's this extra layer of guilt.
Right. She feels guilty for being unhappy because, on the surface, Jerry's a good provider. Her life looks good.
She convinces herself the constant emotional struggle is just normal relationship work, because that's what she was trained to do, to believe the emotional complaints are frivolous.
And her mother even sided with Jerry, told Sophie the joke was funny and that she should get over it. The pattern just repeats itself.
It's a perfect parallel. Her mother's lack of empathy aligns perfectly with Jerry's emotional insensitivity. Sophie had, without knowing it, chosen a partner who recreated the exact emotional dynamic of her childhood.
Where her feelings were always invalidated.
Always. And she convinced herself, I should be happy while feeling fundamentally alone.
Right.
The trauma isn't just what happened to you, it's the unconscious choice to reenact it.
This leads us to the trap of self-control, which seems to really affect people who are taught that showing any emotional need is a sign of weakness.
Exactly. Take Jake. He's happily married to a really supportive woman, Kayla.
Yeah.
But despite being happy, he felt constantly exhausted from faking happiness.
Taking it.
Yeah, he felt he had to be upbeat and in control all the time. He was terrified that if he showed any strain, his wife would be devastated and furious, just like his angry, emotionally immature mother used to be.
So he was projecting his mother's reaction onto his wife. He was still trying to be that emotional clone his mother demanded.
He was completely trapped in a trauma response. He was so scared of that rage of having his feelings extinguished again that he maintained this impossible level of self-control. And what he discovered in therapy was the sheer amount of repressed anger, of hate he felt toward his mother for systematically shutting him down.
And the sources make a really important point here, that hate isn't a moral failing.
Not at all.
Okay.
It's a normal, healthy signal that your boundaries have been violated, that your emotional life force has been suppressed. For Jake, realizing that the hate was justified, that it was directed at his parents' immaturity and not at him, was the first step toward finally letting his guard down with Kayla.
And finally, this lifelong training in denial, it leads to not trusting your instincts. You're trained to ignore your own inner prompts, and that leads you to go along with relationships, deep down you don't actually want.
Megan's story is such a powerful example of this. She broke up with her boyfriend twice, but her parents just pressured her relentlessly to marry him because he was wealthy and successful and, they loved him.
So she went through with it and then felt intensely guilty years later for wanting to leave.
She felt guilty because she couldn't explain her pain in a way that sounded valid to the outside world. Her emotional complaints, "He doesn't listen to me, we have no fun," were dismissed by her parents and her husband. They just countered with factual reasons why she was wrong.
It's the ultimate gaslighting. Your feelings are incorrect because the facts say you should be happy.
It is. Megan felt embarrassed that her emotional needs were more important to her than her vows, which society says are sacred. But here's the core takeaway for you, the listener. Vows and promises are not relationship fuel. Mutual emotional responsiveness, that feeling that someone is genuinely interested in your inner world, that is the single most essential ingredient. Without it, a relationship is a barren landscape, no matter how successful it looks on the outside.
So Megan had to unlearn the belief that everyone else knew what was best for her.
She had to reclaim her own truth. She'd been trained her whole life to believe that wanting to feel special and truly seen was selfish. And that self-doubt, that's the most lasting, limiting legacy of growing up with this. Healing is all about consciously reclaiming those instincts.
So as we bring this all together, what we've synthesized here through all these patterns, the rigidity, the egocentrism, the total lack of relationship repair, is a really clarifying truth. Your emotional suffering was never about you. It wasn't because you were broken or unlovable. It was about your parents' own arrested development.
And that realization right there is the cornerstone of recovery. It just lifts that crushing weight of self-blame, those years of confusion from trying to get water from a well that has been dry forever.
That relief of reality, that's the first step to freedom, isn't it? Once you understand that EI people have real structural limitations, you can finally set realistic expectations.
And, crucially, you can stop seeking a deep emotional connection where it simply cannot be found.
Right.
You learn to accept the kind of relationship that actually is possible with them. Maybe it's a relationship based on tasks or hobbies. But you stop getting hurt and disappointed over and over by their lack of emotional response.
You shift the question from, why can't they change?
Yeah.
To, okay, I know why they can't change, so what do I do now to protect myself?
That's the empowering question.
Yeah.
As we close out, I want to circle back to one last, really subtle but profound characteristic the source material points out. It's their fragmented orientation to time.
Okay, what does that mean?
It's a powerful concept. When an EI person is emotionally triggered, they live in what's called an eternal now. Their actions are ruled completely by the feeling of the moment.
So they don't learn from the past.
They don't. They don't use the past for guidance, and they don't anticipate the future consequences of what they're doing right now. This is why their problems and their inconsistencies just happen over and over in cycles. They don't have a continuous timeline.
So the mature distinction then is that you, the adult child, are now actively working to connect time. You're learning from past pain, making sense of present feelings, and consciously setting future goals.
That is the ultimate act of mature differentiation. You are creating a conscious, continuous, and accountable personal history. And so the provocative thought we want to leave you with is this.
Right.
How does this conscious connection to your own personal history now enable you to choose partners and friends, the people you let into your deepest emotional life, who live in that same continuous, emotionally accountable reality? Your ability to connect your past pain to your present awareness, that is your superpower. It lets you recognize and build real two-way intimacy and finally leave the emotional loneliness of your childhood behind.